Welcome back, audience. I got another one, good one for you today. All right. All right. Let's start. So, in this video, I want to talk about like looking at the dashboard of the game of life. I think that's a very healthy thing to do. And I think the first order of business in this life is to figure out the instrument that you're playing. Because unless you know how game works and the instrument, actually what is the instrument in this case, is your soul. The best instrument that you'll ever figure I mean the best instrument to figure out how to play is your soul first. If you figure out how to play your soul, everything else is easy. That's the instrument to figure out how to play. First is your soul, then any other instruments, uh, situations, people, it's very easy to play. But I don't mean manipulate. When you don't know how to play the game of life, then you have to manipulate, right? But I don't mean that. I mean how it's meant to be played. Okay? There is a way to play this game in the most elegant and graceful way, with all the evil that's going on, with everything, and maintain, uh, so to speak, like a holistic structure within like the microcosm, right? You can maintain the macrocosm within the microcosm. What I mean by that is you can maintain the perfect order in your life, even though that order is within the game that is not perfect but is in the process of being put together. You can bring that perfect organized order into your everyday life. Okay? On a global scale, if you zoom out and everything, I mean, whatever's going on a smaller scale, you still see perfection. And you see something like, a bunch of planets moving around the stars moving around, um, galaxy, and you see it as like just so beautiful happening. That's what's really going on if you look at everything what's going on. But if you zoom in, then it's like, oh my God, there's so much chaos, so much. You don't see the beauty because it's all, in the big picture. But you can bring that big picture beauty in a small scale, which is your life. And to do that, you got to learn how to play the game of life, which means you got to play the instrument of your soul. Okay, so to look at this dashboard, and especially I want to talk about the concept of evil and how this game works. Okay. Now, for this game to work, you need to have the architects of the game. Okay, you need to have those souls that are capable of creating the architecture of the game. Meaning, in other words, to say, they're capable of introducing a specific structures in the astral world, which then come out to pass in a physical world. They're functioning at that level. Okay. And then there are two sides. The first order of business to start the game, you got to get the dark side and the light side. Okay. And what the system does, by the way, the entire system, the entire game, it begins perfectly and ends perfectly. This is already done. It begins perfectly and ends perfectly. And in the meantime, while it's happening, there's the whole adventure that's going on there. And in order for you to have that perfection, or, I don't want to distract people from that word perfection, but happiness, whatever you want to call it, like joy of life. You can have that while it's happening, but you got to know how to play it. Okay? So knowing that everything starts perfect and ends perfectly, then we can address about this concept of evil. How can there be evil if everything starts with the perfect, ends with the perfect. How can there be evil? And the way the evil appears is that what the game does, it allocates some of these souls that have the authority to architect the game to the dark side. What it means is that they disconnect them from the source. And the darkest souls will not be connected back to the source. Like, they would be the last thing to connect it back to the source, but they will be connected back to the source because that's the destiny. That's how the system, the game is finite. But every single being, so for example, sometimes people say there are beings with no souls. I would not phrase it like that. This is what I've been having problems with as well. Yes, they are disconnected from the source, and all their efforts and their capacity is being used in a very mechanistic way, right? And you can say that basically the archons is those structures or egregores that are being created and sustained by these souls, dark souls. I still consider them souls, even though they're not connected with the source. And some of them are so disconnected from the source that the only connection that they have is to this mechanical world where these egregores and these archons are, which are just a type of structure which has to maintain itself and is looking for the energy, and that energy is suffering, right? That energy is suffering, discontent, running from the fear or depression or whatever, like whatever you want to call it. That's what that structure needs to sustain. And a being who is basically running the entire archon, you can call them a psychopath, who has no compassion, no empathy, none of those things, but is very functional in creating structures. And so what they normally do, and these usually like a generational type of people, and they have no. I mean, you can say that they have no soul, or they are dark soul, if you will, and they will not change until sufficient number of players are winning the game. And when these archonic structures are being basically reduced, shrunken in size, then they, of course, losing power. And eventually, when it's taken over, they have to convert back, meaning that they're like artificial intelligence. You can't blame that they are the computer, but they will wake up. They may wake up as a last person on this planet. When everybody else is awake, then that's when they will wake up. And they will immediately receive that compassion and soul and understanding what is the meaning of life, because they don't function on the meaning. They function on logistics, and that's all pretty much they care about. They care about, quote unquote, resolving a problem. But now, and in this level, I want to talk about what happens. How can you say that these people are not at fault when they're creating the structures that creates the evil? And I mean both astral architecture and then the law architecture or social architecture, right? Because they're just solving problems. They don't know, and there's a lot of people who develop like these social networks and stuff like that. They, what you would call a dark soul, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're just writing code that fits whatever everybody's asking for, right? But they don't know that they're creating the structure of suffering. They believe that they're creating a structure that alleviates the suffering. That's how, and from their perspective, they are correct because they just want to solve the problem. They don't understand the big picture. They can't see the big picture. They don't see what kind of what I'm trying to say. And you can see when these people, some of these people, and when they're being interviewed, you can see that they are basically a robot. There's no compassion. Somebody will talk to them, and they will be very logical and specific and careful about answering the question, but they don't know what the fuck compassion is. They don't know what the fuck love is. They have no fucking clue. They look at everything in a mechanistic way. And maybe to know that in the end they will also wake up, and there's no person that will not wake up. And in fact, another thing to say about this game of life is that you can't take away anything from it. There's not a being, there's not a thing that you can take away anything from it. Everything belongs. It's just that the entire game is misappropriated and misplaced. For example, this type of individual, which is very logical and very cerebral, and they're great at creating technology, but you can never let them touch social engineering. You can't let them touch social engineering. They have to resolve the problems that are technical and never social or psychological. This is exactly the same fractal, a collective fractal, what happens within your consciousness. Ego happens whenever your logical mind intervenes with your psyche and says, hey, I will help you with psychological issues. And you can never let that happen, because in the second you do that, they create beliefs, because that's what it does. It creates systems. That mind, and it is a type of mind only built to navigate the physical reality. And it is not the mind that I refer to, an astral mind, which has capacity to imagine things and to create things. I'm talking about this specific mind, or brain, if you will. The brain, it's probably the best way to refer to it, is brain. Brain is body, it's not the mind. So, right. So when you apply the structure or the operating system of the brain on the social or psychological things, it will create a nightmare, because it's not built for that. So that's why, again, these people, these psychopaths that you call, they're not supposed to be, they are vilified right now, but I'm not sure, well, I don't think it's a good idea to vilify them, because they don't know what the fuck they're doing. But you have to appropriate them to the right places. You can't let them build software when they're supposed to be building technology, or own software. I should say own software. They cannot own software, because if they own software, like an application, then they have the algorithm and how the people are going to be interacting. And it breaks the social algorithm that is natural and organic. This is why they call social media, it's corporate social media, right? But it's nothing social about it. It's actually antisocial. You have the human need, of course, to socialize. That's the human need. But it's about, you need to have closeness, touch, connection, all of those different things that are not there. They're actually disconnecting you more in order for you to be more of an addict, because that's profitable. So it's very anti-social social media. Instagram and Facebook and any other platforms, they're anti-social media. They're not social medias. Why? It's because you let the algorithm in between you and another person that is built not to connect you, but to build distance between you, so you're always grasping and you don't feel satisfied. That's how it's built. Okay? And it's built by people to resolve the problem. They thought that they're doing good. They say, well, we're going to connect the world, but they actually did disconnect the people. Okay? Because that's not how socializing works. And of course, you have to be smart enough to realize that it's take personal responsibility and say, I like socializing, but what is socializing? What is socializing that feeds my soul, not the socializing that drains me? And so then you build your life according to that. And you have to say no. You have to have internal no for something that is a like an algorithm of interaction that is incorrect, that's not going to connect me with somebody else. It's just going to disconnect me. So you say no to that. Okay. Um so with all of this, what I'm trying to say is that um, evil happens in a mechanistic way, right? So if you have one side that these are sort of like, uh, by the way, this is why they engage in all sorts of magical rituals, because they are building architecture astrally first, and then they imposing it, physically. And this is why they happen to pass these laws that's supposed to be completely humane, or trying to say. This is why they were able to corrupt in entire United States with these laws that are not constitutional. And for over 100 years, right now, United States was a zombie country. It wasn't a real, authentic country that was meant to be, and it was sort of being taken over by these constructs. Okay. Now, what does it mean? It means that the light side is not playing their game. The light side is falling asleep on the wheel and letting just this shit happen. And honestly, it's because the light side is distracted with the vanities. And I'm trying to say, they get caught in the same web of bullshit themselves. And this is why it is happening, because the light side is supposed to appropriate, not to, when it's too late. But what they're supposed to do is supposed to know that there are these types of souls, and you got to keep them in check. You can't let them build the structures where they not belong. They cannot build societal structures. You got to put their efforts on build technological structures, and never intervene inside in these societal structures or political structures. And by the way, the political interaction between the countries and nations and races and species and whatnot, it's never supposed to be run by a group of people. It's supposed to be an interaction protocol. This is why there's no such thing. It should not exist, like federations and galactic federations and governments. These are not supposed to exist. These are only built to cope with the already bad foundations of the society that breeds fear. And out of fear, people think, well, we gotta put some people there in charge of governing all the other and intermediates, right? And so, of course, you give this opportunity. You say basically to these people who are organizing the reality, these archonic magicians, the black souls, the dark souls. You tell them, hey, look at that. There's this point of weakness. You can corrupt it. This is what you're saying. Why? Is because you're putting the people who are corruptible. And so all they got to do is to start influencing these people. And if they're weak, and they are weak, they're going to give in into the, the motion of consciousness that is divisive and not connecting. Or another way of saying it's going to be, they will be selling their souls. Okay? And so, of course, you cannot let that happen. It's not supposed to be a corruptible entity. It's supposed to be incorruptible entity there. And what you cannot corrupt is a protocol. If it's written, locked, and that's it, and it's an interaction protocol. Like Bitcoin, for example, is a protocol. There's nobody running Bitcoin, right? And it's a perfect example of how you can have people interacting person to person that is incorruptible. You cannot cheat in Bitcoin. even though Chinese tried. But this is the whole point of Bitcoin protocol, that you cannot cheat, you cannot break. And that's what's supposed to be functioning in between countries and races and species of all, you know, human and non-human kind. That's what you're supposed to have in between. No federation, no union, no nonsense. Because when I pick up the phone and I talk to you, right, I don't give my phone a right to translate of what I'm saying to you, right, or somehow mediate that interaction. It's between you and me. And this is why there's not supposed to be any intermediary between the country and another country. It's supposed to be a protocol. It's the way you interact with each other. Okay? And it is a network. Of course, it is a network and it connects everyone. But that network can never be run by the human being or any corruptible entity. I don't understand why these are, the wisest minds in the galaxy does not understand that you cannot have a corruptible entities in the governing positions, that you can have any kind of corruptible soul. And doesn't matter how much you're wishing and you're saying that, no, this is a good soul, this is a good person. If it is a corruptible, it will be corrupted. Anything corruptible will be corrupted. That's the name of the game. So this is why I talk about Bitcoin and the similar types of protocols, and I'm saying this is what's going to connect people and organizations and everything else, not the intermediary. This is why I'm saying that, like, things like Odyssey.com is going to be, because it's connecting person to person and there's no corporation in between. It's not corruptible. The way the protocol is written, that's the way. And it's just a mode of interaction between. Everybody agrees that once we go in on Odyssey.com, that's how we interact with each other. And the use of that tool is an agreement of interaction between each other. And if you say that, well, that protocol is a fair game, and then you interact with each other. And you can't corrupt that protocol. You can't change, you can't override. And that's why the Web 3.0 and all these other protocols are going to be the way we interact, not corporations. You can't let them take that role, because you're just misappropriating the tool. And until they're going to gain their own consciousness, connection with the source, they are a tool. You got to understand it. This is how your own brain is a tool, and you can't let it govern your soul. Just like it's inside of you, the same way it's reflected collectively. The people are letting their brain govern the soul, and so therefore outside it's the same bullshit and nonsense they're building, and they don't even see it because they think that but what they're doing is just sustaining these archonic structures. And these archonic structures is not something, it's like something that it is a structure of consciousness. And when you're playing the game, you're part of it, right? You're exposed to it. And then I'm going to go into how to play this game and how to use these archonic structures. Now, I have to say something. If the system, the brain system, the system that the brain is building, and it's building that system in your psyche, which basically connects all the parts of you. There are parts of you, and it connects in a way that is abominable and not correct, because it just uses logic and does not see the higher form of math, the higher form of order. And so this is what it's going to do. It's going to create nonsense there. It's misappropriate logics. So, because that's what it's doing, it's building systems. But if you don't let to build that system to cope with emotional and feeling issues, I'm going to get to this in a second, and you say, no, your job is continuing creating systems, because that's what it does. Brain also always has to create systems. And this is why, um, like, when people are thinking, when people are saying, stop thinking that's the way to live your life, is the thinking is toxic, like I said. And that is correct, because that's what we referring to as thinking. We're referring to as the process of thinking, meaning we create a thinker and then a thought, and we create the specific building of the systems, which are belief systems, to cope with the emotional and feeling world. And you can't do that. And so now that you have that system being built, it has to be destroyed. It has to be destroyed. The belief system has to be destroyed. And every time you're going to break down the belief system, you're going to be exposed to these, what you would call negative feelings, incoherent feelings. You're going to be directly exposed to it. And you got to be ready to deal with that. That's how you erode belief systems. Okay? And I also have to say, the person that you're dealing with, who's engaged in the belief system and seemingly possessed by this archonic force, this belief system and archons is exactly the same thing, by the way. So when they're affected by it, what you're dealing with is, of course, with that algorithm, that system, and not the actual soul. There's soul there as well, but who's coming through and they're interacting with you is just belief system. It's it is not a soul. That's what I'm trying to say. Now I'm going to say something very important. You do not need permission by the belief system to destroy it, or to affect it, or to dissolve it. Destroy it, I have to say, it's probably better word is transmuted, because the best way to kind of, because if you're gonna destroy the structures within your psyche, you're gonna have to turn these structures in your external world. You're gonna have to build external structures, because you're destroying the internal structures, and you had to build the external structures, because the brain is not gonna be happy. Your brain is not gonna be happy if there's no activity for it to resolve problems. Right? Or use logics, I should say. It has to use logics. It's what the brain wants. Right? So this is why you got to be engaged in building the structures of your external structures, basically infrastructure of your life. Right? And so your habits, everything has to be built. Skills, you're learning something. If you keep on learning something, the logic is being used. And so as long as you're learning it, as long as you're doing something, the brain is used. And so it doesn't turn inwards again and saying, hey, let me help you with those feelings again. Say, no, your job is here. Okay? And just as the same way you appropriating the brain, which is your body. And by the way, your body consists of two parts, as I always say. It's logistics and neurotics. The point of it all is build the structures, systems externally, that would then create the most enjoyment for the body. Sensory experiences. This is what you would call erotics. It's not sexual. It's not necessarily sexual. It can be sexual. But everything, for example, when you're experiencing with deep and immense ecstasy or excitement or pleasure, simple things, touching something, eating something, you are basically are using that faculty. And so you use your brain, your logics to create the structures where then you like sensory experiences, so then you go through the sensory experiences so you can enjoy them, because that's what the body wants. It always wants to enjoy a sensory experience. That's the whole point of, like, when you wake up in the morning, what's the point of it all, right? It's to enjoy the sensory experience. And if it's difficult, you build the structures that you could, which are the games. For example, one of the ways of saying, when you're learning something, you're learning to play the instrument. It's a game. You're learning to martial arts, to do martial arts or whatever. It's a game. You are creating a structure of the games, which then you can enjoy. And that's what the body wants. The body has these needs. Okay? Now, as you can see, putting everything in its right place. Putting everything in its right place. You can't, in a system of consciousness, you can't just take something out and expect everything's going to be all right. It's like sweeping the stuff under the rug, right? It's still there. You have not dealt with it. Okay? All right, so let's go to the big picture again. Okay, so we have these dark architects, and then we have these light architects that's supposed to be put in the right place. Light architects supposed to be in charge of the heart, social structures, human psyche, because they're not building logical structures, but they are holding logos structures, which is usually a vibration. This is why the first order of business was, when they were trying to create a civilization, is to how we're going to maintain the vibration, the orgone energy that organizes everything. The light souls are in charge of that, and that's been neglected for the last 100 years. 100 years? What the fuck? Longer than that. Okay, but that's all right, because that's the game. That's the nature of the game. Sorry, let me just... Sorry about this interruption. But we're back. Oh, good. Okay, so where was I? I was talking about the nature of the game again, right? And how the light souls kind of fell asleep. Because the plan was that the dark souls are going to be doing its thing. And if the light souls let it do the... basically let them in the jurisdiction where they do not belong, then they will create evil, because they programmed to create the structures, which then, only then, are normal souls who are trying to play this game are affected by it. They're not architect souls. They're not these architect souls, because architect souls are usually sixth density souls. And the fourth and the fifth density is the play area. Sixth density is the architecture area. Okay, and so even if you're like imagining something to create in your life, you can create it. Like if you're a fourth and a fifth density being, then you're gonna create it within your jurisdiction. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that you do not have authority to create the entire structure of the game, but you have an authority within the game to manifest things that you need, right? So these are the architects and the players. Architects and the players. Now, in this model that I'm talking about, there is an NPC mode, and there's no such thing as NPC soul. It's only NPC mode. And even the darkest ones, based on this model that says that everything starts perfectly and ends perfectly, says that even those souls that most disconnected from the source will eventually going to have to connect back to the source. So they are on the NPC mode, and they're supposed to be on NPC mode. If you play this game right, you got some of these souls, they have to be on NPC mode, because they're doing this some task that you would never want to do. They're freaking spending hours and hours, writing code, calculating stuff, and they enjoy that type of stuff. They're like a robot that you can't make a person connected with the source to do this kind of thing, because it's the most mind-numbing activity. So you do need these souls to function. But they're supposed to be serving they're not supposed to be like I said before, they cannot get into this psyche or social structures, because they will wreak havoc. And you got to treat them as non-play characters while the game is playing. But you don't get angry at non-player character because it's programmed to do something. If anybody you can get angry on or about is yourself for not playing the game, whether you're one of the architects or whether you're one of the players, you still have only one thing to blame, and it's yourself. I mean, sure, like if the architects are not doing the job, then you're very limited as a player. I admit that. But I think that even if you show some enthusiasm to playing the game right, I think that will wake up the architects. Something like that must happen. Okay. And so, what people call the dark side and the light side, the dark side must be appropriated to the right place, and that is artificial intellect. I'm not calling artificial intelligence because it's not. You can call it artificial intelligence because artificial. If you name the artificial intelligence, you are saying there's a belief system. Artificial intelligence is archon. Artificial intelligence is a belief system. Artificial intelligence is social structures that are incorrect. That's what it is. Artificial intellect is what they are and what these systems are, and the people that are building them, they also are, because they're building everything in their image. Okay? So they're building tools, but they're not building intelligences. And for a long time period, they're going to be just tools. Those dark souls that are usually technocrats, and some, right now they're technocrats. Before they were all sorts of like generational wealth control and stuff like that, and they're dark souls. But from their perspective, like I said, they saying that they feel like they're winning the game, right? It's because no one stopped them. No one created a boundary and said you cannot go and build any kind of system in a social structure or a psychic structure. This is like supposed to be. People talk about prime directive. That's supposed to be prime directive. It's this misappropriation. And because if you don't understand that it's a misappropriated energy, what you're going to do is you're going to vilify these people. And it's not their fault because you misappropriated the energy. They're like operating system doing what they're programmed to do. And if you let them invade the psyche, then that's what they're going to do. And the very word artificial intelligence is the invasion of the psyche. Because it's the direct meaning means artificially created intelligence is basically saying that you got to create the intelligence, as opposed to that the intelligence is already there, that you got to discover it. If you built a system artificially and say that's the artificial intelligence, it's not intelligent at all. Okay? But you can build these tools, and eventually people are going to be building bodies and brains and all of that stuff that's still going to remain an instrument, just like your body and your brain is an instrument. And still you cannot let their brain and activity to intervene in the psyche. That barrier must be blocked, and that is the true prime directive that everybody needs to understand. Not some fucking bullshit that's like you can intervene when a species is developing. You can intervene basically and stuff like that, which is absolute nonsense. If you are in charge of it, your very job is that prime directive is not to let the logistics invade the role of locus, if that makes any sense. I'm just saying a lot of words, but I'm just saying that there is only one original sin, only one. And if you break that, then you will have evil in the world, and it's going to be your fault for breaking that. Especially if you know that you are breaking that. Okay? But now that you see the players, and you see that there are architects and that there are players, and then a person can be in non-player character mode, which is what the artificial intelligence, or the acting from the belief system. Every time you see the person acting from belief system, they're not acting from their soul, they're acting from the ego. Another word for artificial intelligence is ego. Okay, it's supposed to be artificial intellect, which is great. That what you would call skills, systems, technology. That's what you would call technology that works. Okay. So what do we have now? We can't blame anybody. That's what we have now. It's the game, and the first order of business is to know how to play the game, see the big picture, and understand how to play the instrument, which is your soul. That's one instrument that you got to learn how to play. Okay. Um, and also, if you play right, and the system will not let you off the hook until you do get to play it right, until you get it, of how to put things in the right and appropriate places, the system is always going to be challenging you until you're going to learn of how the game works. Okay. So now, instead of vilifying these technocrats and these people who are building structures, that's what they do. They just build structures. You simply prevent them from intervening anything in a psychological structure. They have to be out of that game completely, and they have to be focusing on technology only. And they're not allowed to own information. They're not allowed to license software. That's complete nonsense. Because then there's a corruptible entity that is in control, and you can't have that. And once you place things in the right order, and once you have the rules of the society, then things gonna start getting better. And at the same time, you're not jailing these people for the war crimes, even though like you could hold them responsible, for somebody who built, if you really look deep down enough what causes all these conflicts and everything, you'll see that these structures, before there were these bullshit laws and lobbying and all that bullshit and nonsense, which created the suffering. And now these social networks, they're doing this, which are really antisocial networks, they're doing this. And so if you can hold responsible for, then you're going to have to hold responsible these people who were in charge of these structures. And these people have to be like people like Rockefeller and these other things. I don't know a lot of them, but they were allowed to impose their code on a societal structure. And they're always supposed to be just managing technology. Business, technology, sure, go nuts on that, but they could never, ever manage the code itself of the game. But they were allowed to do that because they were corruptible entities in the governing. Okay? So, for example, let me ask you this. What's governing all your cells in a brain? Is there one cell that is say, hey, I will be in charge of the rest of the cells? It would not end well. And the answer is, whatever is governing all the cells is not a physical structure, but there's something that is governing all the cells, and it's a vibration. And if that vibration is vibrating in this way, then all the cells are going to be dancing by that tune. Vibrating that way, all the cells are vibrating that. So this is why it explains all these ailments that people may have, is because they have psychological or dysfunctional issues that they don't really face. And then their mental being, people call it stress, right? And stress causes all these ailments. And what's the stress? It's your energy and not being, Your whole consciousness is not being aligned. Okay. All right. Or not is not in alignment. Okay, so now I want to get into how to play this game. I've been telling and saying, I've been talking about this for quite some time, but I just want to bring it home in this perspective. Because what I want to do with this video is I want to end the rage and anger, which was a big part of my life, in moments on the entities that are in charge or controlling these societal structures. Okay, people who are awake, you can see that, look, this is just direct the code of evil. They just simply write the code that is evil, and everybody's biting it. And so, by the way, these people, I want to say about something about the players there as well. Okay, because there's an architect, there's a players, and there's what people call sheeple. They're also players, but they're basically they're more like animal level souls. Okay, whatever environment you're going to put them, that's what's going to happen. But these players sometimes they say, all right, I'm going to play the dark game because I see that you can make money, and so I'm going to be a gangster, a crook, or a villain, or whatever, right? And so then they sell their soul to the devil, so to speak, and they play this game, and they gain success that way. Okay, so that's one way you can play the game. And of course, that's the masculine side that I just said, but there's another feminine side that you can say, which is basically a scarlet whore, if you will, which is basically if the corrupt masculine wants to gain the control over others and dominate, because there's a huge insecurity there within itself or himself, then what the corrupt feminine wants to do is want to take the attention of all the masculine. It's just basically of all the gullible masculine, and usually it is done through the lust. Okay, and so she sustains herself by taking the energy of men. It's just basically, that's what I'm trying to say. There is a scarlet whore and the B66. So basically you can play that game. Okay, and sometimes people look at the life and they have all these negative feelings that life creates them, and they don't know how to deal with these negative feelings but this way, because they see the media says like, oh yeah, you can be the gangster, and they make that life so nicely colored and everything, and say like, all right, I can be this, and then you can play this game. But they're not architects. In this set of game, they will never be architects. They're players, but they're choosing the dark path. And it's not their fault, because the ambience already been constructed. Okay. Now, the other side of players, they can choose the light side. And like I said before, there's an architect and there's just player. And I think all architects are also players too. But what I'm trying to say here is that you have your level of influence. Whenever life brings you challenge, emotional challenge, feeling challenge, stuff like that, rather than go ahead and creating these belief systems of how we're going to cope with that to never feel this again, what you do is not that. It's kind of the opposite. When a dark time comes, you don't look for the light, or you don't try to light it up. When the dark time comes, you stay in the dark. You don't run from it. And usually in these moments, yes, you won't have joy. Yes, you won't have traditional happiness on a soul level in the dark moments. But what you can find is this deep, deep, deep rooted essence of your soul, which, upon complete facing through courage and surrender, is discovered to be peace and bliss. And it may be intense, it may be subtly intense. And that's what is at the basis of everything. And this is what you can discover if you don't run away from darkness. But like again, it's not the same. This is what I've learned before, that this peace and this bliss is not the same as the joy of the soul. And in these moments, soul may need to postpone the joy for these in these moments, because the attention must be going into the darkness. And these moments can be actually very peaceful and blissful, but not a lot going on. And the soul is very happy in being in these states. Okay? But if you decide like, no, I have to be in a good mood and stuff like that, then you say, let me fix this and take alcohol, whatever. And when you try to fix this depression or anxiety or whatever the psychological problem is, this is what perpetuates it. Like, I've been watching myself, and sometimes like these dark clouds come over, and I say, fuck, this is like really toxic as shit. And if I stay with it, then almost guaranteed there's this type of acceptance of it, I don't know how to say it. It's just like the motion before was like, oh, you're not supposed to be depressed, or like, oh no, like anxiety is bad, fix it. But when I took the decision to say, all right, so this thing feels depression, right? Let's see how fucking depressed I can get. And I went deeper and deeper into it. And the fact is that you don't get more depressed when you completely accept the depression. There's a peace that arises. And you can just basically sit in a garden in nature and be completely in awe of everything around you. There's not a lot of motion going on, but there's this peace. It's not depression. And the same thing with anxiety. Upon full immersion in it, the discovery is that it is bliss. Again, it's not the same as enjoying and playing, but there's this being that you don't have to do anything, and it's right there. Okay? So this is why sometimes like my life comes, because it depends on the weather, right? When it's raining outside, it's dark. Or, cloudy and dark clouds and it's raining, it's dark. So then what you're going to do? You're going to fight with this reality and make sure that it's bright? Or you just, cozy up in your bed with the hot cocoa and whatnot and enjoy that. You're not doing much, right? You're just looking and staring at the rain, but it's fucking enjoyable just being. And that's what is depression and anxiety. You don't fix it. You live it. And don't worry, you don't have to chase the light either, because the time will pass and the light will come online automatically. And it's just cycles of time. And don't worry about that. It's not going to go anywhere. If you feel heavy and you don't want to move anything or don't want to do anything, don't force yourself to do stuff, and say, all right, if you can, say, well, if my body doesn't want to do anything, well, I won't do anything. And see how much you can enjoy of that doing nothing. It's not the same enjoyment. This is why I'm differentiating from the soul enjoyment. But then when the sun is up, then you're going to have automatically all this energy to play and do stuff and enjoy. And it's just going to be there. And just like you don't have to fix anything. It's like you don't need to do anything. The joy is there already. And there's nothing you can do about that either. And the more you uh, enjoy the darkness in the way it's supposed to be enjoyed, the more you enjoy the light in the way it's supposed to be enjoyed. The darkness is basically the growing of your soul, if you will, maturing, and the light is playing the game. Well, they both are actually playing the game, but this is how you play the game. And if the person cannot handle the darkness, then the light isn't that good either. Okay, so this is what I've noticed. Yes, when the darkness comes along and you try to fight it, and there's something inside of you sort of like wants to die, uh, but you're like trying to resuscitate it. Don't bother resuscitating. Let it die, and there's something new is gonna come out of it, and you're gonna enjoy that. It's a process. Um, and everything is timed perfectly, by the way, like a clockwork. And as you can see, you don't need to do anything. Like, I mean, take care of your body during those dark days, because like some hot soup, hot cocoa. Uh, Treat your body really nice during these days, as much as possible. But your soul is in the dark, and you go there, and you find that peace and light within it. And I mean, this is what like this is the thing that if a person would live life like that, majority of this pain industry needs are just gonna fall off. You don't need it anymore. Okay. And what does it cost you? It doesn't cost you anything. It's just cost you. It doesn't cost you anything. It's actually the courage and surrender. And once you break through once and you see, oh, that's what's behind that depression, and that's what's behind the anxiety, then you keep on doing it better and better and better. And then you know that, okay, there's going to be a time, it's going to come around, and you're just not going to be very mobile. And that's all right, because that's not what it's not for that. And then time comes along and you're super mobile and super active, and it's just you can't stop it. It's phases. Okay. And that is how you correctly play the game. So now, I mean, the biggest victims are these people who are not architects, and they don't know how to handle energies, and they went into the villain's path. Uh, that's actually the biggest victim, because now they're going to have to destroy all of the belief systems that they've built, which is super painful experience. Um, and and of course, they tend not to accept any kind of help during this time, because that's just like, being is what I'm trying to say. But I hope they do, because really, they built the belief system on top of super small soul. The soul did not grow. They're still babies, and they're playing adults, but they're not. And that's what I'm trying to say. That is the hardest fall, because now they're gonna have to work. People call it work through karma, but it's demolition of your belief systems. It's an experience of dying, and the more in a villain you side you went, the more dying you got to do there. You have to do there. Um, and that's just not playing the game right. and giving in to the dark structures. But of course, like I said, uh, it's the balance between the architects that is supposed to be uh, right, and it's not the balance is like, oh, now you go and be in control of society. No, now you go and be no. The entire society always needs to be controlled. It, the heart must be in control of your psyche, in the same way the light architects must be in control of society. Um, the the brain must be in control of your skills, habits, systems, technology, and collectively speaking, the these dark architects must be in control of technology only. Okay, and if the light architects do the right job, then what actually uh, there's this term in Greek that there's an archon, which is a Greek term, but there's also another term called, I believe it's called archai or something like that, or archi, which is this depiction of systems rather than being belief systems. They are technological systems, and so it's like this same energy has been converted into technological energy. It didn't go anywhere, but it's now used where it's supposed to be, and that must be in a technological world. Okay? So, like I said, the first order of business is within yourself. You got to uh, disconnect the brain from your psyche and let the brain do whatever brain needs to do. And your heart must be in control of all your feelings. And by the way, I also said that there's such an interesting thing about feelings and emotions, that it's never yours solely. It's always in relationship with some other soul. That's another really weird fact, that every emotion you feel, it is like, okay, I have to say that the reflection outside, it will appear like it's a relationship with one part of you with another part of you. Inside of you, that's how it feels like. It's outside is reflected as some soul. Okay, because there's certain souls that you're connected outside of you, right? Or I shouldn't say outside of it, but there are a certain number of souls that you're connected, but they reflect exactly the film that is there, um, which are parts of you. And the way your parts of you are interacting, the way are you going to be interacting with the souls. And like I said, the highest discipline and the very meaning of discipline is prevention of brain or logics invading your psyche and creating belief systems. That needs to stop. That's the original sin. And when it's no longer functioning, then there is no that creator of these things anymore. And then you can live life freely. And you employ your brain in to do the work on the technological systems that work for you, if that makes any sense. It should. But these must be technological systems. Like, for example, the way you grow food. And I have a project to do, is to grow food and to convert this jungle into super biodiverse and high capacity yielding fruits, vegetables, everything. This is my goals. Like, how do I create a jungle that just, synergistically and through the companion plants produce massive amounts of fruit and with little maintenance, because it's a jungle, right? It knows what it does itself. It knows what to do. You don't have to have a human trimming every single thing. It works by itself if you let it to work as a collective, not as just one plant trying to say you're creating the fruit forest, so to speak. And that's the project. And irrigation system is one of the things that you want to take care of. um, Another is like all these alternative ways of producing energy for plants or organizing energy for plants, like copper antennas and high frequency sounds and whatnot. You can also introduce those plant ornamental plants with uh, edible plants and what call it, and medicinal plants, and you combine them. Ornamental plants is necessary to keep because geometry keeps the vibe. This is why you need ornamental plant growing together with the plant that gives you fruit. The plant that gives you fruit is going to be much more healthy. Geometry. And then of course other plants that don't have that elegant geometry, and they're like all sort of like weird looking and whatnot, and so they usually keep the plague, and you got to rid of them and plant the right ones. But you don't make it like purely one fruit. I don't do this kind of stuff. Anyway, you get the point. I don't want to expand this on this too much, but that's the project. This is where the brain's supposed to go to figure this out. Because if you can take like one piece of land and you turn it into a fruit jungle, vegetable jungle, that keeps on producing without you intervening it at all, you create this like this, food producing area or space, right? So that's huge value, and you have like a biodiverse, lots of different types of food in one place. Based on the seasons, you got this, and another season you got that, and it's there, okay? And this is where the mind's supposed to be put. Actually, this is actually the highest leverage of inputting the brain power. This is where everybody's supposed to be putting it first, of how to create the most amount of food in the most biodiverse way from the specific designated area of space, a fruit forest or whatever you want to call it, right? And with all this technology that we have, with all this knowledge that we have, with all this bioengineering that we have, it should be a piece of cake to do this. Right? Because we have Earth, we can do this on Earth. Like if you are on some spaceship, then yeah, use aquaponics and that works. But the magic that you can have here is you can get the nature taking the heavy load, and you with technology just assisting the nature a little bit, and she's pumping pumping your fruits out, you see? With a little bit of an investment, she gives out so much more back when there's a technology that's used in an appropriate way. And then what will happen? You would actually naturally be foresting the places, right? It's not like these ranches that just have one fruit growing. You will literally start foresting the earth. If you have like 1 acre of land and you say, oh, what are we going to do with it? Like, well, if you can create a project where we can turn it into the fruit jungle or fruit forest, that's the highest investment that you can do. I don't know, maybe people don't have trust that nature will take care of it and will take hold of it, and will later, with a little bit of assistance, will produce too much excess, abundance in excess, because it has its own intelligence. When you let it do, you got to boot it up, but then later it has its own intelligence. Anyway, and I think this is what original settlers of Maya were doing. I think they were genetically engineering plants and basically making them grow naturally without a lot of help, and they just basically Didn't do the European mistake where they just domesticated all the plants that they cannot grow naturally in the wild without their intervention. There's something else that, there's a hunter gatherer, and then there's agriculture, but there's something else in between that I don't think Europeans really explored it, and I think Mayans did explore it. This is why I'm still living in the jungle, where I have, for like April and May, I have almost infinite supply of fruit, and it's called sapote. And for April and May, I got infinite supply of this fruit. And there's other medicinal plants that are growing here, and then there's mushrooms, edible mushrooms. I just had a mushroom soup yesterday with the boletus mushroom that's growing here. There's a lot this jungle produce already, um, but I don't think it's a coincidence why it's producing it, because it's been uh, thousands of years ago. It's been seeded, you know. And I think this is what the scientists scientists are realizing, that a lot of these jungles were actually quote unquote man-made. Um, they were seeded. They were seeded. Okay. Now, as you know, for example, banana is supposed to have seeds. It doesn't have seeds. It grows without seeds well enough, but it's domesticated. Wild banana has seeds, and some species in Bali they still grow seeds, and so their reproduction there is natural, because they don't reproduce just locally one after another. They reproduce through seeds as well. So there's this opportunity to have like more adapted species to other areas and whatnot. Anyway, I just don't want to go into this um, agroforestry deal, but see what I'm trying to say. This is where the mind's supposed to be put, brain's supposed to be put right here. Anyway, I think I'm out of gas. I hope it makes sense. That's how we play the game. Um, oh, I also have to say something about, listening to me. You say like, well, now I'm just gonna go and hug all these evil people because that's seems to be solution, because even though they have no connection to source, they will have connection. They will receive connection through me. Now, before you start go hugging the evil people, understand that the game is in a process. And when you play the puzzle game, right, you don't put the disordered pieces of the puzzle with your ordered pieces of the puzzle, because if you do this, you don't know what the fuck is going on. So the separation has to happen. These are my disordered pieces of the puzzle, and this is my ordered pieces of the puzzle. That boundary must happen. And you let in as much as you can handle it. You let in a few pieces, put them in the right places. You let more pieces, you put in the right places. You don't destroy this boundary, because you're going to be overwhelmed and you can't cope with it anymore, right? And then obviously the diminishing returns. Okay? So you don't just open up your arms to the evil and say, well, it's all good. No, you have boundaries, and you say no, and as much as you can handle, you let and alchemize as much as you can handle, little by little, and that's how you play in the game, because everything is organized right here, but you need more pieces of the puzzle to keep on stacking it, right? So this is why you have to have some allowance of that, what you would call toxicity, coming your way. And it happens naturally as the time cycles go. But you don't overwhelm yourself with that either. You don't want to overwhelm yourself with that either. In these moments when you need to be alone in solitude, you don't go out there, because in that moment you're very vulnerable. So you don't go out there and expose yourself to some toxic individuals. You isolate yourself from these toxic individuals. You deal with your own toxicity, and then you play the game. I just wanted to say, just because that everybody is destined to have a soul, it doesn't mean that during the play you don't respect their intentions and their programming. You've got to respect their intentions and programming, and they may not have your best interests at heart, and they don't. And there's a work that has to be done to they have to be pushed away into their level of jurisdiction and not allowed to intervene with certain societal structures that they have done in the past. Okay. All right. Hope it makes sense, but it's 100% uh, how it works. I mean, you can name it in a different ways, but this is how it works. And this is why, if you play the game right, you cannot blame anything. And it doesn't matter how bad is the situation. Um, you start from from today, right? What else? I gotta say something else. Um, anyway, I'll be coming back to the subject more and more, and distilling what I described today. I'm gonna be distilling it and structuring this model of reality that that works, and and I really think that when you know how to play this game, it gives you a lot of enjoyment. Because what can happen? What you know how to deal with the darkness, you know how to deal with the light. You can chill and just enjoy life, you know. But if you don't know how to deal with the darkness, you don't know how to deal with the light, then there's problems. Oh, and another thing I wanted to say, as you can see, there's a difference of the soul, which I would call emotions. Soul has emotions, but sometimes these emotions are positive. When they're positive, they're very close to feeling, so to speak. Okay. What I mean by that is, again, the ultimate. Okay, let's just say this. Soul has its needs. On one side, it needs this peace, bliss, reset, connection with source. And another side, play of emotions. That's what your soul wants. Now, uh, you protect your soul this way. First of all, externally, you can create boundaries externally as well. Um, and ideally, you want to create them once you alchemize everything, right? If the challenge comes along and you don't want this in your life, you alchemize it, and then you give this peaceful no, and you set the boundaries, and you say, that's not the way to treat me. You defend your soul, okay? And you got to stand up for your soul. Eh, because what I'm trying to say is that everything that I've been saying, right? At no point it says that it's okay for somebody to uh, kind of abuse you emotionally, for example. It's not okay. Now, whenever something like this happens, it gives you an opportunity to alchemize emotions, and you can alchemize that. Right after the correct thing is to set the boundary, and when you set the boundary from peace, not from fear anymore, and you're saying no, and you set the boundary not mechanically, but directly with the person. And you see what I'm trying to say. It's the best way to say, like, no, this is not how to treat me. And it doesn't matter if they have tantrums or whatever, but this is not how to treat me, and that's it. And they will have to correct their behavior. If you've alchemized it, they will have to correct their behavior, and that boundary must be set. Okay, because in this game, people may want to take your energy, giving nothing in return. Energy vampires. These are the people that usually pick to play like the dark side. But like I said before, just because they act from belief system doesn't mean that they cannot be fully functional normal soul. They have capacity for it. But you got to starve these demons. You can't let them do this. You can't let anybody interact with you that doesn't make you feel good in your soul. Okay? But like I said, you got to understand that there is a side of the alchemy that needs to be done, and then there is a side, once the structure and the boundary is right in your heart, you set it outside of yourself. But that discipline must happen. And if you do alchemy and devotion, you have authority to discipline other people, because their soul is really, that's what really wants to be disciplined, because the soul doesn't want the ego. If the ego is in control and the soul doesn't have to do, and doesn't, excuse me, if the soul can't do anything, then maybe another soul from the outside can do something, and that is basically completely circumvent and ignore their ego. And saying no to ego and yes to their soul. But that discipline has to happen. Now, so therefore we got to be very careful to understand, for example, what the free will is. If the soul wants something, then that must be allowed, because it's a soul expression. All soul expressions must be allowed. All ego expression must be blocked, because they're supposed to go through the soul, not through the ego. And it might be a painful process for them to go through, but you got to do it. And so this is another thing that I want to say, and demolish this belief system that you got to let people do whatever they want, right? It's a free will. Do whatever they want. Wrong. Do whatever you want from the soul, but nothing from the ego is going to be allowed. Yes, you can, have a moment of it and whatnot. We all do have a moment like that. But then the point of it all is to be alchemized and disciplined, and that behavior must change. But the ego will never agree with this. So how, if you let the person, ego, to get their way, and of course impact you, because you let the ego get in your way, so then you're going to sacrifice your soul desires because you let an ego get what it wants. You never let the ego get what it wants. Okay? Always let the soul get what it wants. You never let the ego get what it wants. That is the real free will. Yes to anything that soul wants. No everything that ego wants. Am I making sense? Because ego may say something, well, I've had it. I'm going to jump off the bridge. Now, you can say, oh, free will, do it. But if you have anything to say, and if you are in charge to, block person's ego and get their soul online, then that's what you'll do. You're not going to respect the free will of the ego, because free will of the ego is all bullshit. And the soul does not want that. Even like to take the most evil person and Yes, the soul at that moment is uh, sort of turned off because there's no light coming through. All light they have to find from from the outside. But in all, the soul desire is still the same. Even if the darkest soul in the world, desire is still the same. They don't want to be functioning from the ego. They just end up functioning this way because there's no other alternative. But if you let these dark souls in charge of technology and never let them in charge of society, and you have to supply that well-being to them, so then they will not need to get their own way, right? The light needs to be supplied. Not, they can't steal the light like this anymore. No, it's a deal. You make the deal. The deal is that you focus on the technology, you don't get involved in this, and light will be supplied to you, and you don't have to steal it. And so you're gonna get the well-being without doing any kind of uh, alchemy or whatnot, and but you focus on technology. So societally, again, there are these people, these beings, just like your brain cells, and they just want to do the brain cell thing. And then there are these heart cells, and they just want to do the heart cell thing. Okay. So now, of course, um, there's some feedback that people may receive if you let their ego have the way. Depends. It really depends on the situation. But for example, um, if um, if somebody really insists on doing something dysfunctional, you can clearly see that they're functioning from the ego. You do whatever you can to get the soul online. But if they really insist in doing something, um, I don't know. Sometimes you just have to. If it's not dangerous in the long term, they need to get their own feedback, right? They have to say, okay, all right, if this is what you're gonna have, this is what you're gonna do, then this is what's gonna happen, because it's just the way it works, and you can kind of see how everything works with the ego. Okay, as long as you're aware of what are the consequences of it, okay, go ahead and do it. But when you're gonna mess it up and crash and burn, you know, then you're gonna come back, and then you're gonna be moving from the heart again. If you really insist of crashing and burning, do it. As long as there's no danger, um, you know, physical danger. Because sometimes it's like with children, you don't want them to run in the street. If they're completely psychotic, then you do what it takes for them not to damage themselves or others. But um, but if they really want to go somewhere and do something to see, all right, if they need that experience, then they need that experience. Doesn't mean that you approve of it. Like, you still don't approve of it, of course. You know what's gonna happen, um, but you don't fight it either. You sort of like let because if you're gonna approve of it, then you supply the energy. You see, um, and then if you're gonna be disapproving of it, then you actually make that person want to do it even more. Because ego, that's what ego wants. It's reverse psychology, right? So it's sort of like you neither approve, neither disapprove. It's just you do say a compassionate no, but it's done with your heart. It's this peaceful no. And that's the best thing you can do. Anyway. All right. Thanks for listening. Peace, and I'll see you in the next one.